Thank you, Tyrone. Thank you for your service, sir, and thank you so much for those kind remarks. I really liked that's never been done before, where Shannon was my wife was introduced that way. I think that was special, and I appreciate that. And you have a fine son. Daniel's a great guy. But y'all, I'm proud to be with y'all this morning. Thank you again for inviting me. Y'all are highly well represented down at the Capitol with Josh and with Marty. Just outstanding leaders, conservative leaders that stand up for principle. So I know. So I know y'all are proud of them, and I've met Steve as well many times, and he does a great job on the commission. But it's, like I said, it's great to be with y'all this morning. I thought I would share a little bit about my background, although that was already done significantly, and tell you why I want to be your governor and really how I would lead as governor. And then getting with groups like this, I love to take questions and answers and get a dialogue going. But as was mentioned, I grew up here my whole life. The only time I've been gone from Georgia was while I was at the United States Military Academy and while I was an officer in the United States Army. Did get to play football at West Point, which was a great honor. There was a plaque on the side of the stadium, and it was from General George C. Marshall. And we all touched that as we took the field, and it was General George C. Marshall was not actually a West Pointer, but he was the chief of staff of the Army during World War II, and he said, "I want an officer for a secret and dangerous mission. I want a West Point football player." And again, that inspired us as football players, as athletes, because as was mentioned, I'm not that tall, and so my point is obviously the service academies aren't getting the Tier 1 Division 1A athletes, but we're fighters and we work hard. And the other thing we know, and this is what inspired me about touching that plaque, we know that our real mission is not to play college football. It's to lead our sons and daughters overseas to defend our freedoms. And so that's what inspired me to want to choose to be an infantry officer. There's a lot of different branches. But I wanted to be where the action was. I wanted to be the best leader that I could possibly be, and that's what the infantry was all about. So then that brought me down to Fort Benning, where I learned to jump out of airplanes and to become a ranger. And I took over my first rifle platoon with 101st in June of '01. And as we all know, just 2 months later, all of our lives were changed with September 11th, and certainly my team and my life was changed. And I took that rifle platoon to Afghanistan in January of '02. So we were some of the first Army on the ground. We relieved the Marines. Any Marines in the room here? None. Well, Semper Fi, but it sounds like we got more Army folks in here. But we relieved the Marines, and we were defending the Kandahar airfield. And so we were just living in holes for about 47 days. In fact, it's such a stark contrast when you go back now, because there's tents everywhere and it's very comfortable living in Afghanistan. But did 2 tours with 101st, got into real estate, was in the development business, and then about a year and a half later, I got called back in, was sent back to Afghanistan because of the surge in Iraq and Afghanistan, if you all recall, and we basically ran out of soldiers. So I did 5 years active, and then got into real estate, got called back in. And this was also mentioned in my bio, but it was my first experience understanding that government's broken, that we spend billions of dollars on what I call low return activities or broken philosophies, and we'll get into more of that. But what that means essentially is that you can spend as much money as you want on an issue and not get the intended result. And that's what you're going to get when we entangle ourselves in long alliances with countries that do not share our values. And so, our nation is so strong because we can fight it and win our nation's wars. We can. But to be boots on the ground for a long period of time trying to get people to believe the way we believe with a helmet on your head and a gun in your hand, you're probably not going to get the intended result. So I just realized, we've got incredible leaders in the Army. I had been an aide to a general. I had worked at the higher levels of the Army working with him. Leadership at that high level was not lacking. But what was lacking was the broken philosophies of our elected leaders, folks that think we can continue to be all things to all people in government and deliver results. Can't do it. That's why the phrase, to be a jack of all trades and a master of none. That's why our founders brilliantly decided that we would have a limited government model, where we would focus on a few things and do them well, and thereby delivering results for taxpayers. So I got inspired to want to run for an office, and I've been in the state Senate for 5 years, and I can tell each and every one of you that there's so much more we can be doing to move the conservative agenda forward. But it's not going to happen. I think my friend Marty and many others in the state Senate can attest, it's not going to happen unless we elect a true conservative leader to be our next governor. And that's just the way that our state is run at this time. You have to cast that vision from the top, and that's how it's going to be implemented. So I want to tell you a little bit about what that means. What does that mean to me to be a true conservative leader? And there's a number of things, and we just took a picture with our friend President Donald Trump, but I stand with him. I stand with that man because his principles are right on the money about how we can save our country. And one of the key areas that he's highlighted is on the issue of illegal immigration. And I stand with him on no sanctuary cities. I stand with him on just about everything that he's doing up there. There's not that there's daylight there, but we cannot create daylight there. We've got to have our elected officials working with him to implement his policies, and so that's why I stand with him, and we need to continue to do so. And so I mentioned the sanctuary cities because even just this week I posted on my Facebook page, a governor in Illinois signed a law saying that Illinois, and this is a Republican, that Illinois would be a sanctuary state. So it's craziness that we would have a state or a city undermining federal law in that way. And as governor, that's not going to happen under my leadership. And if a city wanted to, or a county said, we're going to be a sanctuary city or county, they wouldn't receive a nickel of state funding from my administration. Another area is, and I mentioned this in the limited government piece, aren't we all tired of the government spending money on things you didn't ask for and things you don't need? We've got to have a more focused approach. And here's the other thing about our party. I'm a Christian. I think a lot of us are Christians and Jews and people that want to help people, okay? We all want to help people, but the government is not going to be the arbiter of another person's success. So we have to focus in the areas where government can deliver results: public safety, transportation, education, and we have to do a better job partnering with ministries and nonprofits to help the least of these, because the government's not going to get it done, and yet we're spending billions of dollars trying, and the life change that we're after is not being affected. So we've got to start spending less on those broken aspects of society so we can actually fund the core competencies of government. So that's going to be a huge plank of my government. I call it budget reform, but that's kind of boring, but that's basically what it is. It's the governor and the legislature working together to focus our priorities on public safety, transportation, education, and leave all those other governmental operations. We've got to cut governmental operations. We've got to look at food stamps, look at social welfare programs, and those areas that are not delivering results, we need to cut them. The other thing is the income tax. We're constantly, as governors and leaders, working to create economic development in our state. But it's competitive out there, and we're competing against other states for economic development. And we've got Tennessee to our north, no income tax. We've got Florida to our south, no income tax. And so that's why I want to eliminate Georgia's state income tax. And I've been working on it in the Senate, but you've got to have executive leadership that has that focus to implement that vision really from on top. And so that's why that's a big plank of mine, and that's why we're going to get it done. And I'll tell you, I got to meet with the governor of Tennessee to literally talk with him and understand how you all do it. How do you all do it? And do you like it? I thought maybe he'd say some of what I've heard here in Georgia, which is we need that income tax. I thought he might say, I envied that Georgia has an income tax because it helps y'all balance your budgets more. He didn't say that. He said, I think all state government should be run without an income tax. He said, you look at what's happening for us in Nashville and Chattanooga, and so it was a very good conversation, and it furthered my resolve that we need to do this in Georgia. And then, you know, another area is transportation. I mentioned this. Maybe you'll see on some of my materials, and it goes back to the limited government thing. A couple of years ago, we were talking about raising taxes for transportation, okay? And I fought against it quietly. I was not in front of newspaper cameras. It was more of within our caucus, and saying, if we just transition some of the monies that we've had experienced through growth, then we can allocate more money towards transportation without raising taxes. And I lost that fight, and we ended up passing House Bill 170. But the point I'm making is transportation was only 5% of our budget. You know, this is a core competency of government, and it's only 5% of our budget. Transportation should be, you know, 11% of the budget, maybe up 15. In fact, when the Atlanta metropolitan region was growing at a significant rate in the 1970s, transportation was 15% of the budget. It's 11% today in Florida. In Georgia, it was 5% before we passed 170. Now it's at 7.5%. But we shouldn't be passing a tax increase to fund transportation at a higher rate. We should have the discipline in the legislature, in the budgeting process, to prioritize transportation. And so that's what I'm for, and that's what I'm talking about when I say I want to double our investment in transportation in my first term without raising taxes. So to me, those are some conservative ideas in terms of policy. And then also, I want you all to know a little bit about my heart from a value standpoint, since I don't know each and every one of you personally yet. But I'm a Christian. I gave my life to the Lord when I was in 8th grade. And we all have our own development experience as a Christian in developing our faith and belief in the Lord. Mine accelerated in a very big way, obviously, in my tours of duty overseas. You know, they say there's no atheists in a foxhole. I can tell you that's true. Every day before we went outside of the wire, which is the safe and secured zone in Afghanistan, I had a volunteer prayer with my team. And of course, it was volunteer, but everybody joined every morning, and we had a prayer before we went out, and we did go out every day because I was supposed to mentor and train the Afghan National Police, and they were an indigenous force. They were Afghans outside the wire, so we had to leave the wire to effectively do our job. And in doing so, we were in multiple engagements with the enemy, and I truly believe that the Lord protected us and brought all my men home safe, and me, without injury. And so I'm very grateful to him for that. But the reality is, though, is that it's much larger than just our safety and security. There's a lot of decisions that need to be made as a governor. And so what process, what filter are you taking that decision-making process through? And so I wanted you to know that the governing philosophy that I have has two major planks. Number one, it's my Christian faith. Number two, it's my belief in the Constitution and our founding values and principles. So when you merge those two together, and our founders say, we're going to protect life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, the natural flow from that is, I'm an adamant protector of life, an innocent life, and life that is, conceived at conception. So any bill that were to come across my desk that were to move the issue of protecting innocent life closer to conception, I would sign that bill. The other thing on life, too, again, the first thing our founders wanted to protect is the Second Amendment, which is one's ability to protect themselves and their family, and that's why we believe in the right to keep and bear arms. And so, I'll be your greatest defender of that right. I know what it's like to need to protect your own life, so I think our citizens should never have that right taken away from them. And then finally, with an issue that is sadly misrepresented, and that your state senator has been an outstanding champion of, is religious liberty, and that liberal judges over time have undermined it and have downgraded its stature of protection. And we need a governor, because the legislature has acted, that's going to stand in the gap and understand the value of that constitutional protection, and be willing to sign a bill that's going to restore religious liberty to its rightful protection under the Constitution, and I will do that. And I've said I will do that. So that's a little bit about my heart and my values as well. So I've done a lot of talking. I just want to tell you all this, and then I'll take your questions. You know, I've given an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I've put my life on the line overseas to protect those values for our country, and I've faced the enemies of our country on the foreign side. And I can tell you that Islamic terrorism will never bring our country to its knees, because we're too strong and they're far too weak. But what will bring our country to its knees are weak career politicians who undermine the constitutional values and principles that made our country great. And we need true conservative leadership in this state to help us reach our full potential, and I'd be honored for your support. Thank you.